so I decided we're going to go back to the sugya that we were doing in Yoma earlier, and what we started, like we touched on the last time, was sugya a little bit later in the parak about tshuva, but we'll get to it eventually. So I think we'll continue from where we were more or less. And what we want to do is, I'm going to start from here, um, from this Braita. See, I'll get it bigger. So here, Michael, why don't you read Tanu Rabbanan?
Tanu Rabbanan, mifakchin pikuach nefesh b'Shabbat, v'hazariz harezem b'Shubach. Ein tzarich litul reshut mebeit din. Ha-ketzan, ra-tinuk shenafal yam, poresh musuda uma'alehu, v'hazariz harezem b'Shubach, v'ein tzarich litul reshut mebeit din, v'af al-gav kad siyad kivarei.
All right, yeah.
Okay.
So stop here for a second and just
Okay.
translate what you did so far.
Okay, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught that one is able to nefesh to save a life on Shabbat, and if one is when like zealous or quick to
Yeah.
do it, that's praiseworthy,
Mm-hmm.
and one does not need to ask permission or get permission from the Beit Din. Okay, so how is this? If one sees a child that falls into the sea, one could spread out a net and bring him up. And if you're uh, zealous on this, that's praiseworthy, and you don't need to get permission from the Beit Din, even though you'll trap fish in the
Mm-hmm.
net.
Okay, so continue. Ra'ah.
Okay. Rati nukshin afela bor oker hulia umalehu Hazriz harizeh mishubach ve'ein tzarich litul reshut mebeit din af al gav dam taken darga. So
Okay.
if one sees a child fall into a pit, one can uproot sand or the dirt in order to bring him up. And if one is zealous for this, it's praiseworthy, and you don't need permission from the Beit Din, even though you're like would be making a step in the hole in order to get the child out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Keep going.
Okay, so Rasha Nin Allah Delet Bifnei Tinuk Shover Umotzia Vazriz Harizem Meshubach Ve'ein Tzarich Litol Reshuma Beitin V'afal Gav Dekam Mekivein Lim Tber B'Shifei.
Mm-hmm.
If a child gets locked behind a door, you can break the door and bring the child out. And being zealous for this is praiseworthy. You don't need permission from the Beit Din, even though that you have the intent to break into oh yeah that you even though that you may make shards, I think, like not shards but pieces of wood that could be used for kindling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then the last one. Mechabin.
Mekabin umafsikin mipnei ha'adlika b'Shabbat v'azriz harezem meshubach ve'ein tzarich litul reshut mebeit din af al gav dekam memakech mikokei. So one could put out a fire on
Mm-hmm.
Shabbat, but mafsikin, what is the mafsikin here? One could put it.
Mafsikin would be to put a barrier.
One could put out or put a barrier in front of a fire on Shabbat, and if one is zealous in this, it's praiseworthy, and one does not need permission from the Beit Din, even though that one could be making, if I remember correctly, like embers, like coals that you could use.
Yeah, the idea is that you would be, as Rashi says, mashpil, makich would be mashpil to like bring down the fire, like pat it down. Umatzia hagachalim, and lay out the coals in order to roast on them in the evening. In other words, you could use them for cooking after Shabbos. Okay, so Um, the Gemara here goes through a tzrichusa. So, in other words, it's going to make an argument that this Braita brings so many examples because I wouldn't necessarily have learned one out from the other. So, Paul, why don't you read Utzricha?
וצריכה דאי אשמואינן ים משום דעת אחי בהכי הזה לי אבל בור דקה יתב אימה לה צריכה ואי
Okay, so stop there. Let's do that one. We'll also do one by one. So let's do this one. Diashmin and Yam. Mishum de Adam. Yeah.
What we saw before was in Baraita. This is the Gemara. This is the Gemara.
Yes, and that's why in all of my in all of my sheets, I changed the font.
You have the font, yeah.
Right, the font is an indication that this is the Gemara. But also the language tells you that it's a Gemara.
Yeah, I understand.
As you can see. There are, by the way, there are a few passages in Mishnah and in Braitot that are in Aramaic, but it's very rare. And also, you generally don't see arguments. In other words, argument meaning like the reasoning. You don't necessarily see reasoning in Mishnah and in Braitot. You do occasionally, but not often. It's usually the Gemara that discusses that. So this is all indicating that this is Gemara. So tzricha. So what do I need?
Ashmo inan yam. I don't understand.
Okay, di'i ashmo inan yam. So what was the first case? The first case was
the child who fell into the sea, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they saw a child fall into the sea. So I need, in other words, so the tzricha, this is a general heading. Tzricha, I need, meaning I need all of these cases. And why do I need all of these cases? Because, for instance, the Iyashmin and Yam, if it would have taught us just the case of the child falling into the sea, what was the din there? What do you do if you see a child fall into the sea?
Yeah, you need a metzuda. It's a net here to pull him out of to ishlof oto.
All right, exactly. So you throw out a net to capture him. Even though you might bring up some fish at the same time, and you're not allowed to fish on Shabbos, right?
Yeah.
All right. Mishum da'adahachi v'hachi azel le.
What is adahachi?
Adahachi v'hachi. It's like, it would be like in Hebrew, we'd say, toch kedei kach. Right? Al kach v'kach. In other words, toch kedei kach, because in the time, in the time that what? In other words, what would have held you up from throwing out the net? Why would you not have thrown out the net right away?
I assume that there are isurim shonim which have to do with the Shabbat.
Well, okay,
in each case, it's probably in another isur.
Okay, well, let's say the Bright itself tells us this, that it tells us two things, that if you have to be mefakech nefesh, pikuach nefesh on Shabbat, then hazari zarei meshubach, ve'en tzarich ito reshut mi beit din. Okay, so tzricha, I need the Braita to tell me this case of the child who falls into the water. Mishum adahachi v'hachi, in other words, toch kedei kach, toch kedei, that I would go and ask the Beit Din. In other words, if I were to wait for the time. Like I would see the child and I'd say, hang on, I'm going to run and ask the Beit Din before I save you. So adahachi v'hachi azeole holechlo. In other words, if you take that time to go and ask the Beit
It would
Din,
be too late. It would be
it'll
too
be too
late.
late. The kid will
Yes.
die. The kid will be,
But
he'll sink. Go
But
ahead.
this is true for all the examples because it repeats. They repeat it for that each time they say that you shouldn't go and ask the Beit Din.
Each time it tells us, but so what the Gemara here is going to demonstrate is that not all of that it's not obvious that I wouldn't go and ask the Beit Din. So the first case, that's the most obvious case where obviously you have to ask the Beit Din. So I need that case to establish that when there's an urgency to saving the life, you don't wait to go to the Beit Din and you just do it. Aval bor dekayatev emalo.
Dekayatev emalo.
So what's
Why?
dekayatev?
Why? With the pit, you have time to go to the Beit Din. You can live inside.
So what was the case of the boar? What was the case of the boar?
That he fell into the boar, no?
Okay, so a child falls into the boar. Yeah. That's not it. If a child falls into a pit. So you might say, okay, so why did the Braita tell me that I can take out a net and save the child who fell into the sea? Because obviously, if I don't do that immediately, the child's going to drown. But a kid who falls into a pit, he's not going to drown. He's there. He's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, you can even wait 2 years to take him out.
Oi, oi, oi. That's gallows humor, but mamash kacha. Of a boar, the kayatev in a boar where he's sitting, in other words, he's stationary. He's not going to move. Aim low. So I would say not. I would say in that case, you do have to go and ask the Beit Din before you would take him out, before you would start to dig and try to get him out. Tzricha. So I need it. In other words, I need the Braita to tell me the case of Bor, which is not so obvious. And then, okay, so then I could say as follows. So then in that case, the Braita could have left out the case of Yam and just told me the case of Bor. Because if I have to go and if I don't have to go and ask the Beit Din in the case of the boar, where I know the child isn't going anywhere, so alachat kama v'chama that I don't have to ask the Beit Din where the child is in immediate danger. So that's so the Gemara continues. So read a little more. V'iyashma'in and bor.
Something. Why should we mention the boar, the pit, or some the example of the pit?
Or it would be im melamdim
if the Barata wouldn't bring the case of the boar,
or if I would only give the case of the boar,
only the case of the boar,
right?
Mishum deka
mibit, like biatuta, lavit is to be afraid. So mishum deka mibit,
nivat
in Hebrew. Okay, in Aramaic mibit, right? So mishum deka mibit, because the child is going to be afraid. In other words, so now we're saying as follows. Let's say the Braita just brought me the case of bor. So then I say, what was the heter for bor? Because the child will be frightened.
Yes.
Right? But the next case where the child is behind a locked door.
You could live in there.
Right? About ninalad deret. So why wouldn't he be afraid by himself behind a door? So the Gemara says, Efshar, you can go ahead and read it. Efshar,
אפשר דייתב בהאי גיסא.
Umishtabesh.
לייתב, no, I don't know what's yet.
Okay, Yatev, we just said, Yatev is Yashav. Efshar sheyoshev b'hai gisa b'tzad hazeh u'mishabesh le ba'am goze.
ומשביש בעם גוזה.
So what does that mean? Michael, what does that mean?
You could distract him with nuts. Play with it, basically.
In other words, you could sit, the kid's behind the door. Maybe the kid is crying and maybe the kid is afraid, but you're right next to him. It's just a door between you. So you could make a little game with him. You could take some nuts and start cracking them and making, like you said, like thereby distract him so he won't be so afraid. And you just play with him until the end of Shabbos, and then you break down the door. So tzricha. So I need the case of delet, of the child who's behind a locked door, because I would think that maybe on that I don't have to rush and break him out on Shabbos. Tzricha. B'chabin mafsikin lamali. So then I'm left with the last case. The last case is where it says you can put out a fire.
The fire, yes.
Right? Or you can block the fire. You can put up a barrier to the fire. So what do I need that for? In other words, that seems very obvious because a fire could spread, you don't have control. The fire could spread. Why do I need the Breita to tell me that particular case? I shouldn't need, if I have the case of the child who's behind the door where I can break down the door even though the child's not in immediate danger, and even though I could make it so that the child is not in deathly fear. So why do I need the Breita to tell me a more urgent case where there's a fire and the fire could spread? So obviously I could put out the fire if it's endangering somebody, or I could put up some kind of barrier to keep the fire from spreading. That seems to be obvious. So Gemara says, "Dafil chatzer acheret," even for another courtyard. So what does that mean? In other words, it's expanding on the case. The case as it's presented in the Breita, right? Mechabin mafsikim imnei adlaika b'Shabbat. So what do we assume that means? We assume that means that there's a fire here in this chatzer, and I'm afraid that it could spread and somebody could get harmed. So so why do I need the Breita to tell me that? That's obvious. If I can do all these other things that the Breita mentioned, obviously I should be able to put out a fire, or at the very least put up a barrier to keep the fire from spreading. So why do I need the Breita to tell me that? So the Gemara says, "Da'afil chatzer acheret," even to another.
The fire could expand to some other house, to other.
To it, right. In other words, it could go beyond the immediate chatzer. In other words, that's less obvious. That's less obvious because I could also say I could just evacuate the people in the next chatzer. That, in other words, if it's in this chatzer, obviously because it's going to spread, and I have to save the people here. But what if it has a ways to go? It's not going to burn into the next chatzer so quickly. So Rashi says, "Nafilu chatzer acheret, dleika b'chatzer zu." Right, so the fire is in this courtyard. Nefashot b'chatzer acheret. Maybe there's nobody here in this chatzer now, but there are people in the next chatzer.
The other next chatzer.
And Rashi adds, "Vehem cholim oktanim." They are either sickly or they're infants. They're children. Meaning what? Uh, it may not be so easy to move them out of the way. Lo halchu okay, actually, lo halchu, that's the next part of the Gemara. So 1 second. Huh. Just a second. Okay, so that's what we have established. 1 second. This actually goes down. This goes down in the next block. There we go. Tov. So we did that, I think, a while ago. I think we did that a few weeks ago. But you know, we have to get back into the swing of things here. So that's our introduction to the swing of things. Now, just also to remind you that the reason the Gemara is talking about this is because
Coming back.
okay. The reason Gemara is talking about this is because the last Mishnah that we did, had this line in it that because pikuach nefesh is dochet to Shabbat. Just a second, and now Michael finally showed up, and he'll be sitting with me in a moment, I hope. Just a second. Just a second. I have to make bookmarks in this. Hi, Michael. You're only a half hour late. I hope that next time you'll really come on time. Seriously.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
It really makes a difference. Okay, but I'm happy that you managed to get here. 1 second. Oof. I'm sorry. Let me just open that up in a different place. 1 second. Let's go. Let's go here. Okay, we'll just look at it in the Mishnah. So the Mishnah that we're on, right, a little bit earlier, it read as follows, right? It was the one that starts off with bulmus. Misha chazo bulmus, machilino tofil dvarim tameim, etc. And then we have in machlino tamechatz bat the kelev shoteh. ועוד אמר רבי מתיה בן חרש החושש בגרונו מטילין לו שם בתוך פיו בשבת, מפני שהוא ספק נפשות, וכל ספק נפשות דוחה את השבת. Right, that's the Mishnah that we're working with. So the Braita that we just reviewed is an expansion on this about safek nefashot. Right, so Mefakrim Pikuach Nefesh is based on this idea that safek nefashot is doche Shabbat. So now we get up to this next part of the Gemara, where the Gemara is going to deal more directly with this issue. And it's going to say,
we are very far from Yom Kippur. It's just by association, you get very far away.
Well, we're far away from Yom Kippur in the sense that now we're not dealing with something that's specific to Yom Kippur. So
Yes.
that's true. So it's an interesting, so I could also pose that as a question. Why did the Mishnah choose to put the halachot of Pikuach Nefesh in Hilchot Yom Kippurim? Why did it put it in Yoma and not in Masechet Shabbat?
Yeah, it would be Shabbat. It would be okay if it were in Masechet Shabbat. Of course, Yom Kippur is also a Shabbat, but
Yom Kippur is also Shabbat. So why do you
even
think that the Mishnah
yes.
chose to put? In other words, the Mishnah could have brought these same questions in Masechet Shabbat. Why did it choose to put them in Masechet Yoma?
Well, if these,
You don't have to be. If you want, you can be seen. But the main thing, I want people to be able to hear you. So speak up.
so if these cases apply to Yom Kippur, Kal v'chomer, they apply to Shabbat.
Why? Why is it a kol b'chomer?
Um,
What's more chamor about Yom Kippur than Shabbat?
well, I mean, Shabbat, Yom Kippur, Shabbat, Shabbaton. I mean, it is the, it's, I mean, actually, I was going to say that it's karet in case of
You
Yom
also,
Kippur, but it's also true in case of Shabbat.
yeah.
So so actually, no, I think Yom Kippur is more chamor, but I actually, now that I think about it.
Well, what is the chumrah? What are the chumras of Yom Kippur over Shabbat?
Oh, right, okay, so there are other restrictions that apply on Yom Kippur that don't apply on Shabbat,
Okay,
such as fasting.
Okay, so for example, all right, so I think both of the things you said, by the way, are relevant. So not the Torah calls Yom Kippurim Shabbat Shabbaton. And so there's a kind of a notional or a conceptual aspect to Yom Kippur which might inform me that it's more chamur, that I'll be because the Torah in making it Shabbat Shabbaton does add other restrictions. And so if I say then that you're mefakrin pikuach nefesh on Yom Kippurim, so kol sheken, it will be for Shabbat and for Yom Tov. So that's to, that fits in with your original contention. So that's fine. What's interesting is that, well, I don't know. I could pontificate on this a little bit. I think that answer is sufficient to say why the Mishnah might have associated with Yom Kippur over Shabbat. The Breita itself that we just learned talks specifically about Shabbat, but the whole thing is being brought here in the context of Yom Kippur, right? The Breita says "Mefakrin pikuach nefesh b'Shabbat," so certainly that's true for Yom Kippurim. But yeah, all of these things are going to be applicable also ben Yom Kippurim, ben b'Shabbat.
On Yom Kippurim, you have 5 special isurim, but the other isurim, like for which you also have on Shabbat, are the same. It's not, there is no difference between the dleka on Shabbat and the dleka on Yom Kippur.
Right. Right, but
because it doesn't have anything to do with Inui Nefesh or something like that, or Neilat Sandal, or maybe Neilat Sandal could be maybe.
No, but also Neilat Sandal, according to many poskim, is also only the Rabbanan. But the fasting per se is Dioraita. But the other things, yeah, Michael.
I mean, even if for the sake of argument, I would say that, or even if an argument could be made that in fact Shabbat is more chamor, for the sake of argument, hypothetically,
there's a tzad to say that Shabbat is more.
And I can see where that would be the case, since the prohibition on malcha and for Shabbat is actually repeated more times, I think.
That's not the reason, but go ahead.
Okay, and anyway, even argument be made, it could be that it's placed in Yoma's that just to play out the character of, or to understand better the character of Yom Kippurim as Shabbaton.
Okay, so I think that I understood that. If I understand what you're saying now, I thought that's what you meant to begin with.
Well, I mean, and to begin with, I was saying, okay, I was making a call. I'm saying this that was a call home, but it's but even if the call homer doesn't apply, it could be, just could be just exploring that particular character.
Yeah, so Imkvar, so I might also say that it's a little bit more midrashic in the sense that Yom Kippurim is the day it's the day where we are judged for life and death. And maybe that's the reason that it's included in this context, that the laws of Pikuach Nefesh are included in Yoma. And even though, as we see in the Breita, they're often talked about just in the context of Shabbat, but maybe Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, when he is editing the Mishnah, he decides to put them in Yom Kippurim, which is the day of Din. It's the day of where we think of Pikuach Nefesh in a more immediate way. Just 1 second. So let's continue. Now we're up to where we left off. Must have been a month ago. We're up to here, Amar Rav Yosef. So now that Michael Werner is here, you can read Amar Rav Yosef.
Off of real paper.
Off of real paper.
Actually, I like this so much more. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Lo halchu bepikuach nefesh achar aharov.
Stop. Okay, so explain that. What did you just read?
So they did not rule.
Start from the beginning, Amar.
So Rav Yosef said in the name of Rav Yehuda, who said in the name of Rav Shmuel.
In the name of Shmuel.
Shmuel.
Okay. So what did Shmuel say?
They did not. They did not rule concerning Pekuach Nefesh according to the majority or the consensus. The majority.
Don't try to write too much into it. Achar harov, after the majority. Okay. So now we want to know, what does that mean? What's the rov that we're talking about? So continue reading. Hechidami.
Hechidami. Inim de Ika Tisha Israel v'goy echad Benahu. Ruba Yisrael Minhu. Ele Palge Bepalge Safek Nefashot Lehalek. Lehakel. Right, of course. Ele de Ika Tisha Goim Yisrael Echad Haname Pshita. Continue. De have le kavua, bechol kavua kemechetza al mechetza adami. Lo tzaricha difrush lehatzer acher. Mahu the tema called de paresh meruba paresh kamashmalan de la mahalachu bekuch nefesh achar harov.
Okay, so you have a lot to unpack here. Heichidami, what does heichidami mean?
Oh dear, it's something I know we've touched on many times.
And this is why we review.
Yes.
You know what Chazal say, if you learn something and you don't review, it's like you sowed the seeds and you didn't go back to harvest. So there we go.
Yes.
Heichidami. Michael, what does heichidami mean?
To what is this similar, or what is the case?
Right. Literally means, yeah, to what is it similar? What is the case? In other words, what's the practical understanding of this statement of Shmuel?
Okay.
Excellent. No, it's good that you're here and I can give you a paper. So very good. Inema.
Yoma, which is another phrase that I know we've looked at.
So E means,
Not, no.
is E can sometimes mean not, but here it doesn't mean not. Here it means im.
No.
Inema. If we will say.
If we will say that
Diika.
in this case,
No, sheyesh.
that there is, okay, that if we were to say that there are 9 Yisraelim and 1 Goy,
Beinahu.
Benahu,
What's Beinahu?
we understand it to apply in this case.
You're thinking of Bina, but they were thinking of Bain.
Okay, so between
Among them.
among them,
them.
of course, right?
Right? Beinahu would be Beinehem. Right? So if we say that there are 9 Jews and 1 Goy is among them, then what? Ruba Yisrael Ninhu. What does that mean?
We follow the
Not follow Ruba,
Ruba, the majority
the majority.
of the Yisraelim. We rule according to the majority of the Yisraelim in the group.
You're adding in this. No, it's not. I want you to understand it more literally. Ruba Yisrael Ninhu. Rov Yisrael Hem. Most of them are Jews.
Okay.
Right? That's what it means. It's not. You're thinking of Rov like we go after the Rov, but that's not what it's saying. It's saying most of them
That's
are
obvious.
So it's obvious. And why is that obvious? What's obvious about it?
We just said there are 9 Yisrael and Goy Echad.
What's obvious? Let's step back for a
That
second.
Israel are the rov.
Yisrael are the Rov. Wait a second. What are we trying to understand? What's the Gemara trying to understand right now?
Oh, we're trying to understand on what basis can we claim to Kolach Nefesh?
No.
No.
You just read it. Go back to the beginning. What did you read at the beginning?
Oh, we are trying to understand the Rove. We're trying to understand what is the opinion of the Rove that Shmuel is departing from.
No.
Okay, then I'm just being dense.
No. Just, I want you to go back and read it again. Amar of Yosef, Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, and pay attention to what you're reading and translating.
Lo halachu b'kolach nefesh acharam ha'harov.
Okay, what does that mean?
They one does not rule. One does not follow the majority in ruling in making a ruling of Kolach Nefesh.
Okay. Okay. I'm a little concerned about your translation. I want to make it a little bit more literal. They didn't go, let's just make it a more literal translation. They didn't go after pikuach. They in the case of pikuach nefesh, they didn't go after the majority, or they didn't go after what's another word for rov? I'll just stick with majority for now. They didn't go after the rove. Okay, so in a case of pikuach, so in other words, the syntax in English would be that would be the way I translate it. That in regards to pikuach nefesh, they presumably the Chachamim Chazal didn't go after the majority. So now the Gemara asked, "Hey chidami, what's the question? What does hey chidami mean?"
To what specific case does this previous state statement apply?
Okay, yeah, so hey chidami. So how does this work out in practice? In other words, when Shmuel makes this statement, lo halchu b'pikuach nefesh achar harov, so what case is he thinking about? What case would it apply to? So if you say the case is that there are 9 Jews and 1 goy among them, then Ruba Yisrael Ninhu, then the majority are Jews. So first of all, the case of that there are nine Jews and 1 goy among them. So what's the case? What's the pikuach nefesh here? What are we talking about? In other words, it has to the case of 9 Jews and 1 goy. It has to be a case of pikuach nefesh, right? In other words, that's the context. So what's the case of pikuach nefesh where we have 9 Jews and 1 goy?
In that instance, you follow the rule.
No, but what's the case? What do you mean? So I have 9 Jews and 1 goy. They're standing there. So what's the pikuach nefesh?
Oh, so
What does that have to do anything with pikuach nefesh?
oh, so presumably these 10 are making we're looking to them for medical opinion. No, is the patient in danger?
No. No. In other words, Michael Schwartz, you have something to say, please?
If I remember correctly, I thought it was a nofelet. The building falls on this crowd of people. 9 of them who are Jews, 1 is a non-Jew, and you can dig them out, and you would dig them out.
Okay, so let's take that case. So that's the way Rashi learns. There's another way of learning, but it's the other case is also similar. So Rashi says, "Ine matishis v'chad nachri," and Rashi says, "V'naflama polet al achad mehem." You have that on your sheet here. Inema, right? So if you say that the case is there are 9 Jews and 1 non-Jew, and a mapolet, right, some kind of an avalanche, falls on 1 of them. In other words, if it fell on all of them, of course you're going to start to dig them out because there's 9 Jews there. But what if it only falls on 1 of them and the other ones scatter? And now you don't know if the one who's under there is a Jew or a non-Jew, right? En yaduim Yisraelim nachriu. I don't know if he's a Jew or a non-Jew. So what would be the din? Obviously, you're going to start digging. Why? Because Ruba Yisrael ninhu. Most of them were Jews. So what? And what is the Gemara trying to understand? And why is this case that the Gemara brought, why is it not helpful to understand our question? What was the question? And why is the Gemara rejecting this case?
So the question, to what specific case does Shmuel's statement that we apply? And so in this particular
and Shmuel's statement was what?
Was that they do not go in B'koach Nefesh following the majority.
Okay.
And this is one case where in fact we do follow the majority.
Well, in other words, here it's obviously not the case that Shmuel is talking about. In other words, in Shmuel's case, Shmuel must be introducing a case that I would not have otherwise known. He's saying in Pikuach Nefesh, I don't go after the rov. So here, I don't need Shmuel because there's a rov that would tell me to violate Shabbos. In Pikuach Nefesh, in other words, what does it mean by Pikuach Nefesh? That in our context, we're talking about Chilul Shabbat or Chilul Yom Kippurim, and Shmuel is saying that you're Mechal Shabbos, B'pikuach Nefesh, even if there isn't a majority. So I want to know, what majority is he talking about? What does he mean? What's the case? So the first case I apply, in other words, I'm starting from an extreme in order to be able to build up. So I say, if there's a majority of Jews and a minority of non-Jews, so it's a 9-1, and a mapolet falls on one of them, so obviously I'm going to start digging, because the fact that there's a rove of Jews there is going to tell me I have to be Mechal Shabbos. So obviously that's not the Chiddush of Shmuel. That's not what he's talking about. So what's the next case? Palga Ufalga. What's Palga Ufalga? Paul, what's
50-50.
Palga Ufalga? 50-50. Half and half. What if it's half and half? What's half and half?
אלא
People
פלגה
who may or may not
ופלגה.
go to the rubble.
ספק נפשות להקל.
Well, so wait, between the two of you,
If it's half and half, you still have to dig them out.
right? So half. What's the half and half?
The people
Well,
who
half
believe-
Israel and half Goy. I think so, no?
Yeah. So I have a group, and it's not 9 Jews and 1 goy. It's 5 Jews and 5 goy.
5 Goys.
And then what happened?
well, if we're going to go in.
So again, because you have Safek.
What happened? There are 10 people. 5 are Jews and 5 are goy.
There was a Mapolet, and all 10 of them are.
No, not all 10 of them.
We just don't know who's
How many people did the mapolet fall on?
one.
1. It fell on 1. And now I don't know who's under there. I don't know if it's a Jew or if it's a goy. There's a 50-50 chance. It's 50% that it's a goy, 50% that it's a Jew. But then what do I say? In such a case, what do I say?
ספק נפשות להקל.
So here I
Because you have
have
pikuach nefesh, you have to be lenient with the din.
and therefore what? Then you'll start to
You have to dig him out.
You have to dig him out. Okay. So palga, so if there's 50-50, it's half and half Jews and half non-Jews, and a mapolet falls on one of them. And I don't see the other 9 now to start taking a head count. Safek nefashot lahakel. That's a din that I learned from the Mishnah itself. The Mishnah tells me if I have a safek regarding pikuach nefesh, then I'm mekil legabe hilchot. In this case, hilchot Shabbat, right? So I'll dig. So therefore, what does this tell me? The case that Shmuel was talking about or not?
No, because we're still not talking about a rove.
We're still not talking about a case where I don't go after the rove, right? In other words, the first case was I had a rove of Jews. So obviously that's not the case that Shmuel is talking about, because Shmuel says in Pikuach Nefesh, you don't go after the rove. So if I have a case of rove, obviously I go after the rove. If I have a case of half and half, I'm still going to be mekil, because I say safek, and here's a safek shakul. It's an even safek. It's 50-50. So I still don't need Shmuel to tell me that I'm going to start digging. Ela diika tisha goyim v'Yisrael echad. So rather, what case must Shmuel be referring to?
Nine going and 1 Yisrael.
All right, what does ika mean?
Ika, this applies. This is the case.
No.
No.
What did you write down? I told you what it meant.
Okay, no.
Ika means yesh.
Yesh, okay, right, of course. Yeah,
Okay.
I did write that down.
Okay, maybe you should write it down.
I did write it down, but I didn't.
Oh, you say okay.
Yes. Different.
Okay. Ela diika, rather there are 9 goyim and 1 Jew. So, and then what happened? I had 9 goyim and 1 Jew, and what happened?
Mapolet falls.
Mapolet falls on
one of them.
On one of them. And now what? And now what should I do?
We dig him out.
Why do we dig him out? Who says?
Shmuel.
Shmuel says, because what did Shmuel say?
We don't go after the majority.
We don't go after the majority. In other words, I need a case, in order to understand Shmuel, I need to be able to produce a case where if I went after the majority, it would tell me that I'm not mifakech haga, I'm not mifakech nefesh, but Shmuel says no, that I'm mifakech nefesh even if there isn't a majority. And so what case could that be? So it could be this case. Could be a case where I have 9 goyim and 1 Jew. Mapolet falls on one of them. I don't know which one. And now there's really only a 1 in 10 chance that it's going to be a Jew. But nonetheless, Shmuel will say, you don't go after the rove, and you start to dig. You start to dig. Now, Michael Schwartz, you continue. Hanami.
Hanami Peshita, Dahave Le Kavua, V'chok Kavua Kamechetza Al Mechetza Dame.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Also, it's obviously that it doesn't apply in this case, since it's a case of Kavua. And any case of Kavua it's as if it was half and half.
Okay. So the question is, of course,
What is Kavua?
What is kavua? What do we mean by kavua? Okay, so let's look at Rashi here for a minute. Eladika Tisha Nachrim V'chad Yisrael. And Rashi explains, Ashmein. So this is the case that we think Shmuel must be referring to. I have 9 non-Jews, and I have 1 Jew. Mapolet falls on one of them. I don't know which one. Ve'ashmeinen, so it teaches us the afal gav de ruba nachrim. It teaches us that even though the majority here are non-Jews, chayshin and shemi Yisraelhu. I'm worried that maybe the mapolet fell on the Jew, umefakhin, and so I'm going to uncover. I'm going to start to dig him out. But hanami pshita. That's also obvious. Why is that obvious? To Kaimalan, because we learn Kaimalan literally means it's established to us. In other words, we've already established Kol Kavua Kemechtzal Mechtzadami. Anything that is fixed, and Rashi is going to explain it a little bit more. Anything that is fixed is like half and half. We consider it to be like half and half. Dinafgalan b'Sanhedrin of Ketubot. I learn out in Masechet Sanhedrin and in Ketubot from the pasuk of Aravlo, where he laid in wait for him. Prat uzorek even lago. This excludes the case of somebody who throws a stone into the midst. All right, so that's all a little bit mysterious. And now I remember last time, which was like a month ago, I had this already brought up. Just a second. You're going to give me a second. I'll bring up, I think what I'll do is I'll bring this up just in the Torah to Mima, because he'll have the drasha. Just a second. Okay. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Okay. So what does the Torah say? V'chi ya'ish sonei l're'ehu. So you have a person who hates his neighbor. The aravlo, and he laid in wait for him. The kamalav, and he rose up on him. The hikal nefesh b'meit, and he hit him nefesh. In other words, what's a mortal blow, and he died. V'nas el chata ha'arim ha'el. Right. So then this person will run to one of the arei miklat. Still with us?
Yes, so here.
Okay. So what do I learn out from here? Va'aravlo implies what? The fact that, I'm sorry, what does va'aravlo imply about this case where somebody kills somebody?
It was intentional, it's
He,
planned.
he intended to do it. It's not shgaga.
It's not a shgaga, it's malice aforethought, right? In other words, he had specific intent to kill that specific person. So what's the drasha? So Torah Tzemima quotes here the Gemara in Sanhedrin that Rashi is referring to, Prat l'zorek even l'go. So this excludes the case of someone.
Still here.
Try to keep your eyes open.
Yes, I am. I
Okay.
really am. I really am.
Okay,
Yeah, no, no.
if you can.
Yeah.
Okay, Prat l'zorek even l'go. So this excludes the case of somebody who threw a stone into the midst. In other words, what does it mean? Let's say you had 10 people. Let's say they're all Jews. You can just take a simple example. You have 10 people, they're standing all around, and this guy just takes a stone, and which he knows if he throws into this group, is likely to kill somebody. It's going to kill somebody. It's not going to necessarily kill a specific person that he had in mind. So in the case that the Torah is talking about, when is this person going to be given dispensation to run to a near miklat? Is it going to be in the case where he had specific intent to kill Ploni, to kill so and so? But what if he just arbitrarily committed an act which could kill somebody? So Prat l'zorek even l'go, so it excludes that case. It excludes the case where somebody just takes a stone and throws it into a group of people and somebody dies. So then he's not going to be included in this pasuk. So let's take a quick look here. So here there's a Mishnah here in Masechet Sanhedrin, begins on Ayin Chet Amud Bet, toward the bottom. And I'm going to read this, and then we're going to have to skip ahead to see how the Gemara, how this drasha is treated in the Gemara, and what this has to do with the concept of kavua. In other words, we want to understand our Gemara here, and we want to understand why our Gemara understands this last case to be a case of kavua, and that kol kavua k'mechzal mechzadami. So before I do that, I want to switch back for a moment to our Gemara. Let me just switch back for a second to the part that Michael Schwartz just read. And what did he just read? So what happened? We have this statement of Shmuel. Shmuel says, when it comes to pikuach nefesh, we don't go after the rov. And then we said, hey, chidami. So what's that case? Where there's a case of pikuach nefesh, where I don't go after the rov. So I say, so it can't be the case where I have 9 Jews and 1 goy, because that's a rov of Jews. Obviously, I'm going to go after the rov. If it's half Jews and half non-Jews, I don't have to go after the rov, because in pikuach nefesh, even half and half is safek nefeshot, and I'm still going to try to save the life of that person who fell, who's under the mapola. So then I say, so maybe it's the case, then what's left? The case where I have a majority of non-Jews and one Jew. And a mapola falls on one of them, and I don't know which one it is. And so there I'm going to say, I don't have a rov, and nonetheless, Shmuel will tell me that bekuach nefesh lo hochinacha rov, and I'll have to be mefakech etaga. I have to start to dig for it. So there, what the Gemara says, the Gemara says that's also obvious, meaning what? I still don't need Shmuel to tell me the case where I have 9 goyim and 1 Jew. Why not? Because that's a case of kavua, and even though we haven't defined what kavua is yet, but if I know that it's a case of kavua, kol kavua kemechza mechza dami. Anytime I have a case of kavua, it's as if it's half and half. And if it's a case of half and half, I just said if it's half and half, I don't need Shmuel for half and half. I don't need Shmuel where there's half Jews and half goyim. And if it's a case of kavua, even if it's 9 goyim and 1 Jew, it's as if it's half and half. And I don't need Shmuel, right? So at that point,
so what does kavua mean?
okay, so that's what we're going to get to. That's what I'm going to explain. But I just
It's
wanted
not like in mathematics.
What's that?
It's not like in mathematics kavua. It's
Well, tell me
variable which is fixed, which doesn't change.
Well, actually, so you know what? I'll explain the way it's working here, and then you can tell me how it works in mathematics. Actually, I brought this up with my nephew, who is a statistician. That's his job. That's what he does for a living, is statistics and probability. But I didn't get to sit with him long enough to get a good opinion from him. He was suspicious of this whole thing. But so the idea here of kavua, this goes to the, wait a second. This is going to take a little bit of time. And so it's going to take, we're going to start to introduce this idea by looking at this Mishnah in Sanhedrin and looking at the sugya, part of the sugya in Sanhedrin. And because it's, now it's 20 till 9, I'm not going to do it all tonight, but I want to start tonight so that next time when we pick up, we'll have already a grounding, because of course everyone is going to review this and know it very, very well for next time. So in the Mishnah says, "Nitkaven larog et behema." 1 second. Does everybody see the Mishnah here? Yeah, okay. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Nitkaven laharog et behema v'harag et adam. Actually, I could make this. I don't know if that helps or not. Let's keep it the other one. Nitkaven laharog et behema. Okay, so what happens? You have a guy, and he has intent to kill an animal, right? So there's a horse that's in front of him, and he wants to kill this horse, and that's his intention. Nitkaven laharog et behema v'harag et adam. But he killed a person. In other words, so maybe he had a bow and arrow, or maybe he had a rock, and he was big heavy rock, and he was going to throw it on the horse. And the horse moved out of the way, and there was some person behind him, and the rock fell on the person, killed that person. So his kavanah was not fulfilled. His intent was not fulfilled. He ended up killing a person instead of killing that animal. We have another case, the Nachri. He had intent to kill a non-Jew, v'harag et Yisrael, and he ended up killing a Jew. La Nifalim, he had intention to kill Nifalim. What are Nifalim? Anybody?
And in Genesis, they are the
No, you're thinking of the Nephilim.
Nephilim, right?
Sorry, that's not it. By the way, it's a good guess, but that's not what it is. What's a Nephil?
I thought it was someone who's in doubtful that they'll live.
Yeah, so a Nephil is a child who was born in the first 30 days. the first 30 days from birth, all children are considered to be a nefel, and why do we consider a nefel, meaning like Michael says, that we're not sure that it's going to actually live beyond the 30 days. And the reason is because there's always this sort of built-in safek that maybe the child was born prematurely. Nowadays, we don't have such sfeikot really, because we can know we can know the moment of conception. But in principle, until relatively modern times, you didn't know the actual moment of conception. So a child, when it was born, for the first 30 days is a safek whether or not they're going to live or die. And so what if and their din is a little bit different than a person who's a ben kayama. So what if the person intended to kill a nefel, the haragid ben kayama, but he ended up killing someone who was a ben kayama, someone who was fully formed, who was past this stage of nefel? In all of these cases, patur. In all of these cases, even though he ended up killing somebody, he's patur. Why? Because what is he patur from? He'll be patur from mitat beit din. Doesn't mean that he's not chayav for other things. It doesn't mean he gets off scot-free, but he doesn't fall into this din of a full-fledged murderer in that regard. Nitkaven hakoto amatnav. So let's say we'll change the case a little bit. So we have Reuven, and he wants to hit Shimon on his thigh. In other words, he's going to take a rock and he's going to throw it. He wants to throw it at Shimon's thigh just to hurt him. He's not intending to kill him, because the rock that he's throwing is not going to be enough to kill him if it lands on his thigh. But it ended up that the rock didn't go on his thigh. It hit him in the heart. And there it was enough to kill him. V'meit. And in fact, Shimon died from that. Patur. So again, Reuven here is still going to be patur, because again, this action did not fulfill his original intention. Nitkaven hakoto alibo. So what if he intended to actually hit him on the heart to begin with? And in fact, this rock was big enough, and if you threw it hard enough, it was enough to kill him on the heart. And it went, but instead it went onto this person's thigh. But it wasn't enough to really kill him, landing on his thigh, v'meit, and then the person died. Again, Reuven will be patur. Nitkaven lahakot et hagadol, v'lo haya ba kedei lamit hagadol, v'chala al hakatan, v'haya ba kedei lamit et hakatan, v'meit patur. What if he was trying to hit an adult, and he was throwing something at him that was enough to kill the adult? I'm sorry, that wasn't enough to kill the adult. It was just enough to hurt him, but it ended up going on a child, and it ended up killing the child, and was enough to kill the child. Again, he'll be patur. Nitkaven lahakot et hakatan, v'haya ba kedei lamit et hakatan, v'chala al hagadol, v'lo haya ba kedei lamit et hagadol, v'meit patur. And what about the opposite case? He had intention to kill the child, to throw something at the child, to hurt the child, and there was enough, it was sufficient to kill the child, but it ended up going on to an adult, and it wasn't really enough to kill the adult, but it ended up killing the adult anyway. Again, he's patur, right? We're going to go through all a few more. But what if he intended to strike this person on his thigh, and that and there was enough power in what he was doing, or throwing this rock, let's say, to kill somebody if it landed on his thigh, but it ended up hitting him on the heart and then he died, then he's chayav. In other words, so he had a rock and he was going to throw this. His intention was to kill this person. His intention was to kill the person. His intention was to kill the person by throwing this rock at this person's thigh. But it ended up hitting him on the heart, and it was enough to kill him on the heart also. There he's chayav, because to begin with, his intention was to kill him. And it was to kill that specific person. Okay? נתכוון להכות את הגדול, והיה בא כדי להמית את הגדול, והלכה לה על קטן ומת, חייב. And what happens if he had a rock and he was going to use it to kill an adult, and it was enough to kill an adult, but it ended up going and killing a child, and the child died, he's also chayav, because there also I could say that he intended to kill, and he did an action that was sufficient to kill, and it killed somebody, so he's chayav. But Rabbi Shimon says, afilu nitkaven laharog et zeh, v'harag et zeh, patur. Rabbi Shimon disagrees, and he says, even if he had intention to kill this one, and he killed another one, he killed somebody else instead. In other words, he tried to kill Shimon, but Shimon moved out of the way, and he killed Levi, he's patur. Okay, so the Tanna Kama holds that if you have intent to kill somebody, and that person, let's say, moves out of the way, and you end up killing somebody else, and the circumstances were that whatever you were using to kill was enough to kill the person that you intended to, and it was enough to kill the second person, then you're going to be chayav because you intended to kill a person and you killed a person. But Rabbi Shimon says, no. If you have intention to kill a specific person and you end up killing a different person, you're patur. That's the basic Mishnah, and from there the Gemara is going to begin. So I'm going to stop here. I think B'li Neder, I'll make up sheets for this part of the Gemara in Sanhedrin, so that when we get a little bit further down, the Gemara is going to first discuss Rabbi Shimon's Shita here in a few lines, and then it's going to get down a little bit further, and it's going to say, Mai Tama de Rabbi Shimon. What's Rabbi Shimon's reason? In other words, what is he basing himself on? And it turns out he learns it out from this pasuk. That what? Amar Krava Aravlo v'kamalav. Right? So this is the pasuk that we saw in Dvarim, and this was the drasha that the Torah Tamima brought. He learns it out because the pasuk says that when is the person considered to be in this category of a murderer, a potential murderer, is when he was lying in wait and he killed that specific person. Ad she'it kavein lo, right? That he had to have kavana for a specific person. So that seems to be a good proof for Rabbi Shimon's shita. So how do the Rabbanan who disagree with Rabbi Shimon, how do they learn the pasuk? They say, Rabbanan Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai, the Rabbanan say from the Beit Medrash of Rabbi Yanai, no, I understand that pasuk differently. I understand it to mean prat l'zorek even l'go. It excludes the case where somebody arbitrarily chucked a stone into the midst of a group of people and killed one of the people there. So you'll see, this is what we'll look at next time. So Gemara here also says, hey chitami. So what's the case? It's actually going to go through the same cases that we went through here. What if there were, but it starts from the other end. What if there are 9 goyim and 1 Jew? So then I'd say they're mostly goyim. And so he should be patur. Or if I say it's half and half, safek nefashot lahakel, meaning the safek nefashot here would be the person who's throwing the stone. I'm not going to put him to death if there's a safek nefashot. Lo tzricha dikatishi Yisrael v'goy echad beinehen. Here, I need it for the case where there's 9 Jews and 1 goy among them, because then what? Davele goy kavua. The whole kavua kemechza mechza dami. So this is the part that we're going to have to understand, and we'll lead up to it, God willing, and we'll finish it next time. So, any last questions or comments for today?
Yes, of course I have a question. What happens if there are 10 goyim and no Jew?
So then, it's funny because I can't remember. I think it ended up that maybe you weren't here. Were you here the last time when we did this sugya? I don't remember
No,
because
probably not. No, I
no,
don't think
because
so.
I knew you were going to ask this question.
No, nowadays the fireworks, the fire, איך אומרים לה, מכבי אש, they
Yeah.
come also for goyim. Yes, that's not.
Yeah, and also doctors, Jewish doctors, even Shomrei mitzvot, Torah mitzvot, right?
Yes.
They save non-Jews live on Shabbat,
Of course.
of course. So what is the Gemara? What is the Mishnah here talking about when it distinguishes between a goy and a Jew regarding pikuach nefesh? So I'm going to answer that in a little bit more depth next time because now it's the end. But the quick answer is that it doesn't. The Torah doesn't allow you to kill non-Jews. But we have to get that clear. There's no. You're not. Despite the fact that I think I saw this essay once by Kahana where he made this claim. Because if you look at the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchos Rotzeach U'Shmiyot Nefesh, you could imply that from the Rambam's words. The Rambam never says explicitly that you're allowed to kill a goy. He never says that. But he says that if you kill a Jew, then you're chayav such and such. The point is, if you kill a non-Jew, you're still a murderer, but you don't have, not all of the same dinim apply. You'll still be chayav. You're not allowed to do it. You're still chayav. But because it's a little more complicated than what I'm saying now, I'll leave that for next time. And again, I'll try to make a note that maybe I'll also send you some references to that just so we have a better idea of that next time. But yes, that's a very good question. And so I'm going to leave it only as partly answered. For practical halachic purposes today, there is no difference. That if you have to save the life of a Jew or save the life of a non-Jew, you're going to save them regardless, whether it's Shabbos or Yontif or whatever, you'll still save it, but not necessarily on the same basis and for the same reasons. So I'll leave it at that. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all, and I hope to see you next week. Anyone? Okay, so Paul, you'll be away for 3 weeks. If you can make it, we'll be happy to see you. And if not, I hope you get to follow the videos. And otherwise, have a pleasant visit in Luxembourg. And everyone else, have a
Thank you.
good
Good night. Good night.
evening. Bye-bye.